Hey guys, Elizabeth Quinn here again with Elizabeth's Scenes and Scents. Welcome back to my channel. Please don't forget to check out my website, which is waftingwonderfulwax.scentsy.us, where I'm Liz Quinn, your lead Scentsy consultant. So today I have a very special video for you. I have a literary melting basket for the month of April, and we are going to do the story of The Secret Garden with some bars that I have here that evoke special highlights within the story. So it is a lovely, lovely book and a very good movie, especially the Hallmark Hall of Fame version by Frances Hodgson Burnett, I believe, is the author. It is just a fantastic children's story that also really, to me, spoke more to me as an adult as I was reviewing this, about a little girl who was unloved, who over time, through nurture and a lot of good experiences, blossoms like a little English rose. So we meet Mary Lennox, who is our main character, far away in British Imperial India, where she and her parents are part of the British elite, and there is a plague in the colonies, and our spoiled little girl, who is neglected by her mother and probably not at all paid attention to by her busy father, is left an orphan. So the actual Indian setting, I thought we would use the bar Amber Hollow, which may not be a good name, but the spices and the exotic factor of this bar evoke India to me. So it has clove leaf and pepper and amber and just all sorts of exotic things. And poor Mary is just absolutely so sad when she has to leave, even though she is very much alone, was only taken care of by her Aya, which was her Indian governess. Everybody else doted on her. She didn't even dress herself, and she's shipped off because of this plague that kills her parents to a complete stranger who's either a long-lost uncle or a family friend, I do not remember which, all the way in England at a big, scary manor house that we are going to call Misselthwaite Manor, according to the book. So Mary, when we meet her, is spoiled, she's isolated, she's alone, she doesn't believe that her mother loved her because according to her mother, she was very plain. The mother in the story was a great beauty, but also very vain. So poor little Mary is sharp and tart, very much like Huckleberry Clementine, which I think is a good bar for her initial character when we meet her. She's around 10 years old, knows her mind, and is not afraid to use her sharp tongue. So when she gets to England, she gets off of the boat and she's just sitting there waiting for someone to pick her up like a piece of baggage. The actual housekeeper of this grand estate, her name is Mrs. Medlock, and she's a no-nonsense English woman, let me tell you, comes to pick her up. So I picked blackcurrant and plum for Mrs. Medlock. This is just a really good, middle-of-the-road, classy scent, but it has strength and gentleness at the same time. Now, Mrs. Medlock, I think, is a little bit stronger in personality maybe than this bar, but it was the best one that I could think of. So they get into the fancy carriage with the matched pair of wonderful coach horses, and they are driving to Misselthwaite Manor, which is this big, scary place far away across the moors of England. So I wanted to honor the idea of the moors. I don't have a good bar for it, but I thought Fearless by Nature, because it has a sharp sweetness and kind of a grassy quality, maybe that would do. So Mary does not like the moors. She says that they are ugly. And I mean, I can see in the movies and any pictures, because I've never personally been to England, that they have a particular rugged beauty, but that flat land with sort of like a coarse covering of some sort of a greenery, and the mists and the mournful wind, which is going to be important later in the story, not exactly charming at first sight. So they pull up to this big, scary, scary manor house, which in the Hallmark movie, I think they actually use Highclere Castle, which is super cool. Many of us would be more familiar with that from Downton Abbey. So she gets inside and Mrs. Medlock takes her to her prepared rooms, and I think that Vanilla Oud and World Traveler are very good bars that evoke an English manor house. So Vanilla Oud is old world wood, vanilla, sophistication, and suede. And World Traveler is good old English oak, dark berries, and a little bit of wine and incense. It's so good. So Mary is exhausted from her journey, falls into bed, and the next morning we meet another character that's in the book who's one of my favorites, the housemaid Martha Sowerby, who's quite cheeky and bouncy and boisterous, but she's also very sweet, and she's really good for Mary, who's spoiled rotten. So she is a Yorkshire girl, Martha, our housemaid, and I thought good old apple butter frosting very much suits her character. So she tries to talk sense into Mary, tries to help her to get acquainted, tries to help her to eat the scary English food, which is lumpy oatmeal and tea and jams and things that our little Indian princess is not used to. So I thought that maybe winterberry apple tea would be a good one, or maybe even a walnut raisin muffin, which I think I have here on the table too. Would be good things to evoke her change of diet and just her whole change of setting. Everything is new, everything is dark, everything is proper, and not anything like her sun-drenched, spicy, exotic land that she was from. So the person who owns this manor, who's a very reclusive and sort of scary character at the beginning of the book, is Lord Archibald Craven. He is rumored to have a hunchback problem and to be a very sad and broken-hearted man because his wife died tragically, and he's been a recluse for about 10 years when Mary comes to the manor house. So he doesn't want to see any children. He doesn't want any happiness in his life. Eventually, Mary has to go and meet him, and it's a very scary encounter for her in this big dark room with this man sitting in a chair by the fireplace just staring off into the embers. So I thought ghostly greetings would be very good for Lord Archibald Craven. He's actually very kind at heart. He's just so sad and self-absorbed that he seems to be not a nice man. So this is a deep, dark, kind of tragic bar, and the plum and the patchouli and the brandy and everything that is in this, I think really goes with this character. So then, eventually, Mary gets settled in. She has met the shocking Lord Craven, actually asked him for a couple of things that we'll talk about later in the book. He's scary, but not quite as scary as she thought that he would be. She's settling in, and she decided that she needs to know something to do around here because she doesn't have a governess yet, and she's 10 years old, so she's got lots of energy. So Mary, her housemaid says, well, you might want to go out and explore the moors, or you might want to explore the gardens. So Mary gets into all this like English garb. So she's got her heavy jumper, her sweater, she's got her big hat and everything in her muffler up to her nose. In the early biting March wind and a little bit of ice and snow, she goes out to explore the gardens, which are all dead and wretched looking. So she meets another wonderful character who is the grumpy gardener, Mr. Ben Weatherstaff himself, who looks at her, and the two of them have a conversation, something along the lines of, neither of us are good looking and we're not very charming either, so we make a good pair. But Ben Weatherstaff, I think really his heart is good and very kind, so I thought toasted acorn and oak would be really good for a grumpy English gardener who's actually very sweet. And he introduces Mary to a very important character who is her first true friend. Because Ben is saying he doesn't have many friends, and this little bird, this English robin, comes and sits on the end of his shovel. And this grumpy English old man starts talking to this robin as though they are the best of friends. And Mary's jaw drops open and she says, well, what are you doing talking to a robin? And Ben Weatherstaff says, he is my oldest and dearest friend. And then, this is one of the sweetest parts in the book, he asks Mary if he would like to meet a robin redbreast. And Mary talks to the robin and the robin talks back to her. And her eyes get wide and she says, I've never had a friend. And so our little robin redbreast is Mary's first friend and leads her to very important discoveries. So I thought ruby nectarine being a very happy, bright, and just the right color for an English robin. Happy, bright scent was good for Mary's first friend, this little robin. So Mary goes out to explore this huge estate with all these beautiful formal gardens, and then she finds a surprise, a shocking surprise. One day when the wind is very strong in March, all of the curtain of ivy gets taken away from a wall of stone, and there is a door that's locked with a keyhole. There's a secret garden, hence the name of the book and really the focus of our entire story. And she goes and tells everybody, I found a garden that is locked, and they all get weird about it, and they all say, oh, but there can't be a garden, there can't be anything there, there isn't anything there, don't ask about secrets, there are no secrets in this house. It's funny how adults freak out when an innocent child asks questions. That's even true in the real world. So now Mary is very determined that she's going to get behind that door because there's something there that's special. So she realizes there's a keyhole, and where there is a door, there must be a key. And Mr. Robin Redbreast helps her to find the key. Now, I do not have an actual key that fits. Oh dear. This is real life, guys. I'm not going to record this again. I've already done it 3 times. So that was supposed to be our inspiring book. This is supposed to be our inspiring key. And that's just what we're going to have. And I didn't break the china. Isn't that good? So she finds this key and she's able to get into this garden. And of course, she doesn't want to tell anyone, but she sort of asks Mr. Craven if she can have a bit of earth. And he says yes in that one meeting that they had that was rather awkward. So she starts going into the secret garden. And then as she's getting to know Ben Weatherstaff and Martha Sowerby, she is finding that they are sort of becoming her friends. And Martha has 9 other brothers and sisters, and one of them is named Dicken, and he is a young man who is an animal charmer and an amazing person who also is good with dirt and plants and all growing things. So Mary is just keen to meet this boy. So eventually they meet out on the grounds, and Dicken, I think, is very, very well represented by our wonderful blue sage and Tonka, because it's a gentle, masculine, kind sort of a scent. And Dicken is very good for Mary, helps her to develop a lot of skills to be able to go out into the garden. They sneak into the secret garden together, and she wants to know from someone who she can trust as another child, is this secret garden that I have found, well, number one, what is it? And what happened here? And is it rescuable? And one of the sweetest things in the whole book is when Dicken takes a cane of roses, because there are all these dead rose bushes and curtains and fountains of roses, he says, when we recover this place, there will be curtains and fountains of roses. So he takes a little penknife and cuts into the wood, and it's wick, which is a Yorkshire word for alive and green and well. He says, yes, it's wick, we can bring it back. And that is one of Mary's favorite new words. She just absorbs that even into her own personal self, that she is wick at heart and she's going to recover too, which is what I love about this story. The message of the secret garden is that things that are neglected can be nurtured back to life. And also, where you tend a rose, a thistle cannot grow. That's another quote that I just love. It's either from the book or the movie, but I believe it's from the book. And it's just so precious and something that we need to think about. Are we tending roses or thistles in our life? So anyway, back to the story. So they are secretly bringing the garden back to life, and the people in the manor are starting to wonder what Mary is doing and getting a little bit suspicious. So she's kind of keeping everything a secret from everybody who's keeping secrets. It's quite funny how the secrets hop around in this book. So she's going back into the manor. She's spending more time outside. Martha, having 9 brothers and sisters, also has a very nurturing mother whose name is Susan Sowerby. So she's Dicken and Martha's mother. She hears about this poor little girl who's come from India who has nothing to do. She buys her a skipping rope, which to us Americans would be a jump rope. And on top of everything else that Mary is learning, she learns how to skip counting to 100. She almost gets to 100, and then she tells Ben Weatherstaff that she's going to get to 100, and he says pride goes before a fall, and she gets to 99 and stumbles. It's quite funny. So anyway, back to the rest of our story. So Mary is exploring the gardens, finding out about the actual story behind why the garden has been locked. And it's because Mr. Craven, his wife, died there tragically 10 years ago when she fell out of a tree. But there's more to it that no one will tell her. Because along with everything she's exploring in the garden and the people that she's meeting, the manor house has secrets of its own. Now they blame this strange crying that happens at night on the wind just mournfully withering across the moors. But Mary isn't buying it because it sure sounds human to her. So being the brave and slightly stubborn little girl that she is, even though she's been forbade to go into the entire place, she can only explore her own wing. At night, she gets her candle and she starts exploring, and eventually she finds this tapestry, and behind the tapestry, this wailing is coming from there, this crying, this horrible, almost ghost-like sound that happens every night. She wants to know what it is, so she's brave and she opens the door and she comes in, and lo and behold, there's a white lump in a bed with a sheet over it, and of course she freaks out, and the thing in the bed freaks out. It turns out there's a little boy, a secret little boy, whose name is Colin, who is Lord Archibald Craven's son. But no one will tell Mary about him because Lord Archibald Craven is absolutely convinced that his son is feeble, is going to be a hunchback like himself, and is going to die tragically, so he wants nothing to do with this little boy that's shut up in his room crying all the time. So Mary starts to secretly come and visit this little boy, Colin, who's the master of the manor when the father is away. And Colin is sharp and disagreeable, and I thought the only bar I could come up with for him would be Palo Santo, which I personally love, and of course his character gets much better as he gets throughout the book. But this is one that Colin is definitely the most disagreeable person when you meet him at first, because he is a spoiled tyrant. So Mary's a tyrant, he's a tyrant. They have the greatest exchanges, especially in the movie, as she is standing up to him, and eventually he demands that Mary can come and see him all the time. And she starts telling him about the secret garden, and they start putting the dots together about his mother and his father and the garden and the tragic loss, and that he's the little boy that when she fell out of the tree, this is the other part of the story, it started labor and he came early. So now his father just associates all the tragedy with poor little Colin. Colin's never been allowed out of bed because they think that he can't walk and that he has a hunchback. Well, Mary starts to help him get stronger. Then Colin finds out about Dicken. Dicken and Mary start to secretly take him to the secret garden. and they show him how to walk. So I will speed up the end of this book. They are working on the garden, all three of them now, because Colin is going in there every few days, starting to learn how to walk, digging around and everything, and he's transforming too. So the nurture and the love of the garden for Mary, for Colin, Dicken being there almost as like a big brother to bring them along. I have a whole bunch of great bars. Spring Forward is just a wonderful earthy garden scent that really evokes as the garden is coming back to life and they're caring for it. Everything wonderful about that secret behind the wall. And then at the end of the book or the movie, you know, there's beautiful cinematography in the movie of all the curtains and fountains of roses and all the greens. Flower Shop is fantastic for that. And of course, the actual roses, which are the most important flower in the garden. Heirloom Rose from our current Epcot collection nails this. So the way in which the book ends is that Mr. Craven is coming back from a business trip and finds Colin walking out in his wife's garden. And it's just the sweetest ending. And Mary becomes a wonderful, functional, and loving adult, and so does Colin, and Dicken tragically goes off. I think it's the Great War, and he dies in the war. And at the end, at least in the Hallmark movie, Colin and Mary, I believe, marry. And they live happily ever after. So I hope you've enjoyed my little jaunt into the secret garden. There are so many characters, and I don't think I'll do an outtake. I think will just leave me almost breaking my china in this. So this is Elizabeth with Elizabeth Scenes and Scents. I hope that you've enjoyed my little secret garden jaunt. Have an absolutely wonderful day. I hope it inspires you to do a creative melting basket in April too. God bless. Bye-bye.